Okay. Okay. 1, 2. Okay. Let's. Okay. 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 Let's find our seats, please. All right, you guys. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming back. We got a nice program in front of you here, so it's going to be a little bit of the Carlos and Bill show here to do the introductions, but we have two great speakers here. So first of all, I'm really pleased to introduce Natalie Gauchner. She's the director of, she's an associate dean at the University of Utah. Natalie's an economist, does a lot of demographics work. I've known Natalie a long time. She used to work in Governor Levitt's office of planning and budget at the time, I think it was called. And so those of you in DOTs know that's the office that controls your budget. So I got to know Natalie pretty well then. But she's also, what I think is even more important, she's a member of the Utah Transportation Commission. So we have a 7-member commission. They're the ones that pick the projects we work on. And so she's kind of important in our eyes too. But I have a lot of respect for Natalie, and I look forward to her comments this morning. So let's welcome Natalie Gauchner.
Thank you, Carlos. Great to be with you this morning. I want to welcome you to Salt Lake City. I'm a native Salt Laker, a very proud Salt Laker. We have a gorgeous day today. I hope you've enjoyed that. I thought just to kind of break the ice, whenever you have an economist jump up to speak, it's probably good if they don't just talk about numbers. But I thought I'd just share a couple of insights as a local Utahn. And I didn't know what to focus on, but I looked at those mountains today. We've got 11,000-foot peaks that surround our city, and I was up in them this weekend. We like to say in Salt Lake City that you can have a cabin in the city. So that's your first sort of local insight. I live in about the center of the valley, and within 20 minutes I can be to wilderness areas, high peaks. I saw moose this weekend. So cabin in the city, that's your first one. Second one comes to my demographic background, and in Utah, we're very young. I think maybe some of you know that. We have a high fertility rate, large families, large household sizes. We're very young. They have this saying, how do you tell a Utah wedding? The bride's not pregnant, but the mother of the bride is. So, cabin in the city and young. And then the third one, which is going to move towards what I hope to share with you today. But we are America's choice for the Winter Olympics. And most of you will remember that we hosted the Olympic Winter Games in 2002. And the U.S. Olympic Committee, Paralympic Committee, has selected Utah to be, or Salt Lake City in Utah to be America's choice for the next Winter Olympics. We do not know when that will be. Still a bidding process, but we're eligible if the U.S. Olympic Committee decides to go for the bid for it in 2030 or 2034. And so as Utahns, we're very cognizant of that, very aware of that, and have just incredible winter sports capital right here in Salt Lake City. So this is where I wanted to start. Yesterday was a big day, 20th anniversary of 9/11, and I wanted to just tell you about a Utah Olympic moment that stretches all the way back to 2002. This is a picture in the opening ceremony at Rice-Eccles Stadium up at University of Utah campus. And you can see 8 U.S. athletes bringing in the World Trade Center flag. And, I'm sharing it with you both because of the moment of time that we're in, because of yesterday. I knew I was going to be speaking to you today. But I also just thought it would be really just sort of warm your heart to think about where we've been and where we need to get back to. And I'm going to begin and end with that in these comments. If you look at this picture, it's going to be on your left, the front athlete. That's Derek Parra, who is a Mexican-American speed skater who won the Olympic gold in 2002 Derek was one of those Home Depot athletes that was like working at Home Depot one day and then on the gold medalist the next. Just an incredible man. He now lives here in Salt Lake City, helps train people in speed skating. But he got the ask to be one of these people carrying out the flag, and he wrote a book about his Olympic experience, and I just want to read you what he wrote about this moment. He said, "You might think my greatest Olympic moment came when I stood on the podium for the first time with a gold medal around my neck. But you'd be wrong. In fact, my most powerful Olympic memory came before the Olympics even started. I got the call from the U.S. Olympic Committee just hours before the ceremony, asking me if I would be able to be one of 8 athletes selected to carry the World Trade Center flag in the opening ceremonies. I was floored." So, he knew he wanted to do it. "Instantly, I knew it was something I had to do, something I wanted to do. It was an honor beyond anything I could have imagined. And while it's now just over, at the time he wrote this, 10 years later, so 20 years later now, at that time, our country was still reeling from the wounds, the trauma, and the pain of September 11th. So remember, this is in February 2002, and of course 9/11 just a few months before. This is the first major gathering, world gathering, after 9/11. He said, "As the opening ceremonies got underway, the flag-bearing athletes and I gathered backstage. We were standing with Port Authority officers whose job it was to oversee the flag. They began telling us how proud they were of us, what the families of the victims were proud of us, that all the people who lost their lives were proud of us. Then he said, when it came time to begin the procession, I touched the flag for the first time, and I remember a physical sensation unlike anything I have experienced. If it's possible to feel your soul being touched, then that's what I felt. As we carried the flag out before a capacity crowd and worldwide television audience, I will just add 1.2 billion people, the silence was deafening. That flag, which had flown over so much pain and loss, still stood for life, love, and the hope of a nation. There are few times in any life when the emotion of a moment is all that exists." And then he concluded at that moment, time stood still. Well, that's a really powerful, at least that's my most powerful memory from 9/11. I was in the stadium when they brought this flag out, and it did fall incredibly silent. And for a brief moment, our nation unified in a way that was really powerful and something I hope we can gain again, and I'm going to talk about that at the end as well. Well, so I'm an economist by training. When Carlos called and said, "Can you come talk to WASHTO and just kind of share some insights about our states and about the economy?" I'm an expert on the Utah economy. I don't know as much about all of your states, but it was very clear to me from a look at the data that WASHTO is a national growth leader in terms of many of the states that are part of WASHTO. And a corollary of growth is opportunity. And so my professional advice is capture that opportunity as a growth region. This economic recovery is absolutely underway. It's muted by the Delta variant. It's muted by inflation fears. It's muted by social unrest. But the numbers are very clear that we are well on our way. And among the WASHTO states, some of you are leaders economically compared to the nation, and some of you are laggards compared to the nation, and so we kind of can show you that. You can't think about the economy right now without thinking about structural changes, things that are changing right in front of us. Many of them were trends that were already in play, but were accelerated by the pandemic. And I want to specifically mention remote work to you. I know that a theme of this conference is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I thought I'd just share a brief moment about that, and then I'm going to close with one other little story. So if I've got it right, these are the WASHTO states, all in red. This is decadal population growth, so 2010 to 2020. We now have bookends for that decade since the 2020 census data is out. This is the growth rates. You can see the state you're in right now, Utah, fastest growing state over the decade, 18.4%. The nation grew at 7.4%, and I've kind of put a little line there that shows states that are above and are below. But what becomes really interesting to me about this data is that 8 of the 10 fastest growing states in the nation are WASHTO states. And the 2 that are not are Florida and DC, and I'm calling DC a state because it's larger than some states. And you can see that pretty evidently here. So I'll let you look at that same data here, just showing you by map. It shows you the growth rates within each state. And you see those darker colors are the fastest growing states. And you can see this dominant growth in the mountain states, in the center of the western United States. You kind of see the southern kind of move and then the western move. But you are part of our nation's growth mecca for this country. And that creates all sorts of challenges and opportunities for you to confront and think through. I will add, if you look at the white states highlighted here, these are states that actually got smaller from 2010 to 2020. And so for those of you that are frustrated that you have to deal with so much growth, just imagine the alternative. And we just had 3 states of that. Of course, none of them WASHTO states. On the economic front, I'm going to show you a measure of just job change. And we do something kind of interesting here in job change because of the pandemic, you don't want to look at an annual change or it's just crazy. So we look at a 2-year change. So we look at where were you in 2019, July. This is the most recent data. There's a lag. Where are you July 2019 and where are you July 2021? And we just kind of pull out the pandemic. We're not worried about that right now. It was just this dramatic shock and whatnot, but we're kind of saying, are we back on track to where we were in 2019? And you can see all the incredible contraction that's occurred, right? We've got 4 states that have actually grown in the past decade. Their economies have grown, in the past 2 years, that have actually grown. That would be Idaho at the top, Utah second, then Arizona, then Montana. And then the rest are contracting, and you can see the U.S. contracting at 2.8%. And I'll show you this as a map as well, if you can kind of see this. I find it really interesting to just kind of see this. I'm going to call it the NAFTA. To you all, I can do the NAFTA freeway or whatever, NAFTA highway, but I can go from Montana, Idaho, Utah, and Arizona. The only states in the past 2 years that's job base has expanded. That's pretty interesting, isn't it? And it gives you a sense of the challenge we have. We have this growing population, and we've had contracting economies over the past 2 years. Well, I expect the economy to continue to improve. We went through such an adjustment with COVID, and we've been through those adjustments, and we know how to do things a little better. And so nobody's expecting this to take off like wildfire or anything like that, but everybody is expecting the expansion to continue with only a 25% risk side. Well, unemployment, another thing that we should look at. Here it's about a 50-50 of the WASHTO states that are below the national average or above the national average. So the unemployment rate in July, most recent available state to state, the U.S. at 5.4%, and you can see those different unemployment rates. What becomes evident to me here as an economist is we have a nation overall that is not at full employment. We have states within the nation that are at full employment, and I count my state among them, right? So the state of Utah with a 2.6% unemployment rate, basically hourly jobs, high-skilled jobs, everything in between, labor shortage. Can't find the workers that we need. And wages are rising, and these are all signs of a labor shortage. But if you look at some of these other high unemployment rates, this isn't the case everywhere. And so we are not a nation at full employment. This is why stimulus, whether you think of it as the infrastructure stimulus or some other things, this is why some economists don't think it's as inflationary as others, because it's only inflationary when you're at full employment. But reasonable people can disagree on that point. Here's how it looks state to state. So again, here, you want to be those lighter colors if you want a low unemployment rate, and you can kind of see how it breaks out. But we have a world of hurt in some places, and we have some other places that are doing well. There's a lot of unevenness in the economy. Well, that's a quick economic summary for you. Now I just want to turn to, I'm only going to show you one slide, but I just want to think about what are the structural changes that are afoot. We know that people have gone to accelerated remote sales, online shopping. We know that online education been accelerated. But the one that's so interesting, and I think particularly to transportation planners, is the remote work reality. And I can see you all looking at this slide kind of like, what are we looking at here? But this is just one way of showing nationally the fundamental shift that's occurred in remote work. So what this is it's showing net out-migration from the urban core of several of our large urban areas. And it's the 12-month sum of what you're seeing. But you can see how we've had sort of this, I don't want to call it steady, but I want to say that it was within a smaller bound, and then the pandemic hits and it shoots up. And when people move, it's a big decision, and they don't quickly reverse, because it's a big decision. And the real growing consensus is that we've learned to work remotely, and it's changing where we live, where we work, how we interact. And I think it could arguably be the single biggest structural change that will affect all of your lives over the next 2 decades. It changes everything. All right, the other thing I wanted to just highlight, and I'm just going to put up a quote here, but the conference planners mentioned to me that equity, diversity, inclusion is a theme of the conference. And I work at the University of Utah, something that we spend a lot of time thinking about. How do we take our educational work, our research work, and have it benefit everyone? And I love this idea that diversity is a fact. You see it everywhere. Equity is a choice. Inclusion is an action, and belonging is an outcome. And I would just challenge you, as you're thinking through this conference and as equity, diversity, inclusion is a theme, that if you don't have a plan, a thoughtful plan in this area, you're part of the problem. I'll let you just kind of think through that. All right, and I'll close now by just sharing another little story. This one I don't have anything I'm going to read to you, and this one is a little difficult to see, but I'll describe this. But I wanted to just say to you that, I started out by saying 9/11 was a time of unity. Now I'm showing you a Pearl Harbor radar plot to show you a time of national distress with the hopeful message that we got through it. And some of you might remember the name Orrin Hatch. Senator Orrin Hatch was a senior senator from Utah. He became the Senate pro tem. And one time I was in D.C., and Senator Hatch was hosting a group of Utah leaders to the National Archives. And I thought, I've been to National Archives a dozen times. Maybe I won't go, but I went. And I was so glad that I did, because they took us into this little room. When you walk into a room at National Archives where people have white gloves on, you know you're in for something special. And there were just all these tables with important documents to our state, to Utah, or just important documents to our nation. They had the first inaugural of George Washington, for example. But they had this radar plot, and it was like maybe 3x4. It was a big, like, poster size, maybe 2x3 poster size. And as I walked over to it, I'm just kind of like, I wonder what that is. And I know it's hard to see, but there's a little polygon at the bottom, and it has OAHU, Oahu, on it. And I thought, this is Hawaii. And then as I got closer and I could see the vintage, I'm like, this is Pearl Harbor. And what this is, if you can see these lines coming down, this is, I'm just going to call it a radar technician. I don't know the right word. But he's writing the times of different things he's seen on the plot. So 7:24 a.m., 7:26 a.m. And he's got all these lines of these squadrons coming in to bomb Pearl Harbor. And the thing that's so crazy about it, I know it's hard to see, but there's a gap at the very end before the polygon, but all the lines stop about a half inch before the island. And the history would note that what happened is that the senior officer told him not to worry about it, that it was a squadron of bombers coming over from California that they expected that morning. So just a really crazy, story in history, to just see the threat and then, the mistake. But then what did we do? We picked up and, led through arguably our greatest generation, and did a really amazing thing for this world in World War II. And I wanted to just close with that, to just say to you that I am really excited and hopeful about the good things to come for all of us and for our nation. And I'm particularly grateful for people like you that are doing the hard work of building, maintaining, creating a life quality for people in your communities. Because I've worked from the inside as a transportation commissioner, I have a deep appreciation for what you do, and I want to just welcome you to Salt Lake City and help you have a great conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Natalie. It was remarkable, especially that last slide. We should take a moment here and think about, I mean, all of us remember, right, where we were when 9/11 happened. And this weekend was powerful. I mean, for those of us that went to events, know someone, know a family, know emergency responders or their families. And we have survived, thrived. COVID will be no exception. We've gone through a lot this year. And as I'm looking at the statistics, the teleworking in particular, isn't it interesting that maybe some of our congestion problems, our global greenhouse problems, air pollution problems, are simply resolved in some way or partially by staying home. Fewer parking lots, fewer buildings built, that kind of thing. Interesting. All of the work that the economists and the analysts will do over the next few years to understand COVID is, and understand its impacts, are going to be probably one of the most interesting things about COVID, and it's going to build our progress in its aftermath. So I look forward to all of that and all the work many of you are going to do in regards to that. So thank you, Natalie. Thank you for that. So now I have the privilege of introducing, well, there she is. I can see you on a screen, Polly. Now I have the privilege of introducing Polly Trottenberg, Deputy Secretary at the U.S. Department of Transportation. As the number 2 official and Chief Operating Officer, she supports Secretary Buttigieg on providing leadership and strategic vision for U.S. DOT. She has an extensive 25-year public sector career in all levels of government. Trottenberg served from 2014 to 2020 as New York City's Transportation Commissioner, where she ran a complex 5,800-person agency responsible for the safe, efficient, and equitable operations of New York City's transportation network, including 6,000 miles of roadways, 789 bridges, and the nation's largest traffic operation and parking system, the Great Staten Island Ferry, an extensive bicycle, pedestrian, and public plaza infrastructure, as well as key initiatives in urban mobility, smart transportation technologies, and safety, which, by the way, where I first met Polly was giving testimony at a Senate EPW committee on this very subject, and I enjoyed it very, very much. In New York, Deputy Secretary Trottenberg helped implement the landmark Vision Zero program, the first in the U.S., taking a comprehensive, multidisciplinary approach to significantly reduce traffic fatalities and injuries. She also led the New York City Department of Transportation through COVID-19 response recovery, prioritizing transforming city streets to promote livability, sustainable transportation, and economic recovery. Deputy Secretary Trottenberg served in the Obama administration as the Assistant Secretary and Undersecretary for Policy at the U.S. Department of Transportation. During her previous 5 years at the department, she developed and implemented transportation policies to address the needs of state and local transportation agencies on every type of project, from roads and bridges to transit and rail to airports, ports, and pipelines. Deputy Secretary Trottenberg's additional policy and managerial experience include her time in the U.S. Senate, where she served with the great Senator Patrick Moynihan, Majority Leader Charles Schumer, and Senator Barbara Boxer. Deputy Secretary Trottenberg graduated from Barnard College and received her master's in public policy from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. And unfortunately, Deputy Secretary Trottenberg was unable to be here with us today in person, but we are incredibly grateful for her participation through a video conference today. Secretary Trottenberg, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Bill. Can everybody hear me? Do I sound all right?
Yes.
Good, thank you. So first of all, thank you for that exceedingly kind introduction, which was long, which tells me that I have become
Sorry.
seasoned
I'm so
during
sorry.
the course of my career. And I do remember finally when you and I got to testify together. I am so sorry I couldn't be there today. I think a lot of you know I want to bring greetings from Secretary Buttigieg, who I think, as most of you probably know now, is the father of twins. And so we are all very busy here in Washington. I want to give a double apology. Unfortunately, today I appear to have got a little bit of a stomach bug. Don't worry, it's not COVID, but feeling not quite 100%. So bear with me. It's probably better that I'm not with you in person today. Let me just take a minute to thank all the folks gathered here. I know a lot of you state DOT leaders, you are a remarkable bunch on the ground making things happen. And as Bill noted in his generous introduction, I sort of walked in your shoes. I was just a city DOT commissioner, but obviously for a very big city with a very big transportation operation, and dealt with a lot of the challenges that you all are dealing with, the funding and political challenges, the demands of a public that is expecting a lot from its public servants these days to work and make sure that infrastructure is safe, that it's responsive, that it's adapting to all the needs that the country is facing. And of course, what you are all doing in COVID. There has probably been no more difficult time to be a public servant in a lot of ways than the past year and a half during the COVID crisis. And I know a lot of you, the challenges of not only keeping the traveling public safe, but also taking care of your workforce, keeping your work going. I want to just applaud you all for your leadership. And I think you all know, unfortunately, we have sort of the COVID crisis, but we have another crisis this summer, and it's the climate crisis. And I don't need to tell the folks at this gathering, because you are seeing it out west with the terrible fires and droughts, and we know that's produced landslides and a lot of damage. And look, I think it broke a lot of our hearts. It was, as you all know, some of you, was an article here in the New York Times about the air quality issues in Salt Lake City because of the fires. And look, we've seen those climate impacts here on the eastern part of the country with, for example, Hurricane Ida, which did tremendous damage in Louisiana and then made its way up north to New York and New Jersey with terrible, devastating flooding, killing over 50 people. So look, we all know that climate is the challenge that states and cities all over the country are experiencing. But we also know that means it's an opportunity for states and cities all over the country, and something that if we address it head on together, this is a climate we think we can tackle. And look, all of you gathered here today, and those of us at DOT, we're the stewards of transportation. We're the stewards of the sector that contributes the most to climate change. So I want to talk a little bit about some priorities at US DOT. And again, I want to start with climate, also talk about safety and innovation. I want to talk a bit about the bipartisan infrastructure bill as well. And obviously it's making its way through Congress. It's been a very exciting process, and how we think it can be so important in helping. So in the climate crisis, I'm very proud to be part of an administration that has made that a front and center priority. And I think a lot of you have already seen that we've started to make that an important part of criteria in our discretionary grants like infra and raise. We're focusing particularly on cleaner modes of energy, public transit, trains, walking, biking, and making sure that those options are reliable and easy. The bipartisan infrastructure plan, as you all know, I think would make tremendous investments in rail, and not just in the Northeast corridor, but investments in rail all over the country. $22 billion for Amtrak, $12 billion for intercity rail service, including high-speed rail, and $8 billion for rail improvement and safety. It would also make the largest investment in public transit in American history, $39 billion. And it will include, for the first time ever, a Department of Transportation Administration program dedicated to climate resilience. And I want to say here that we are, certainly humbled to the task, should the bill pass, of administering all these programs. And we really want to turn to you, our partners, particularly state DOTs. We know not every solution is going to come from us in Washington. We want to partner closely with you. We're also going to be giving you a lot of flexibility and opportunities to innovate. In addition to climate, I want to talk a bit about safety. And I know a lot of the folks in this group, you are passionate advocates on the safety front. And I just have to say, It is a tragedy in our country. We still see far too many deaths on our roadways. Somewhere between 36 and 38,000 people a year die on our roadways, and it's not something to be proud of. If we look to our European counterparts, they have been much more successful than we have in reducing roadway fatalities. And it's something that I've grown very committed to over the course of my career. As Bill mentioned, I got to be in New York City when we became the first city in the US to commit to Vision Zero. And we had years that were, I think, tremendously heartening, where we saw, big reductions in fatalities, and years, unfortunately, where we didn't. And, one thing I know we're all grappling with is one of the effects of the COVID period has been a reduction in VMTs, but an increase of around 7% in roadway fatalities. So work we want to do together with you. And I want to particularly give a shout out to two of my DOT colleagues who are such extraordinary leaders. I know Stephanie Pollock is there, our federal highway administrator. She has been a remarkable champion. And I know working closely with the state DOTs in rethinking how we can make our roadways safety. Also, Robin Hutchison, who I know is a local girl and leads our safety efforts from our policy shop, and obviously was commissioner in Salt Lake. Robin has been also just a tremendous leader and really challenging us at DOT to think through how we can make our roadways safer. Some of the things that they're working on together, updating the MUTCD and other ways we can improve roadway designs. NHTSA will be looking at our new car assessment program. We're going to be rolling out some other ideas we have there. Again, I think a lot of them we want to be doing and partner with you. But we also really, I have to say, and I particularly want to give credit to Stephanie and Robin, have gotten some exciting safety programs in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, should it pass. Approximately $14 billion in new funding to help states and localities reduce crashes, particularly with a focus on the most vulnerable roadway users, cyclists and pedestrians. And look, I know a lot of your states, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, a lot of you are doing very, very creative things on the roadway safety front. And again, we have some good ideas in Washington, but we know you all have a lot of remarkable ideas on the ground. I just also want to highlight, and I know this is one of the themes of this conference, the issue of equity. I mean, one of the tragedies we see, particularly with cyclists and pedestrian fatalities, that they are disproportionately in communities of color, is one of the other areas we are really focusing on at US DOT, reducing those disparities as we reduce fatalities for all roadway users. I want to just come now to sort of the final theme I want to talk about, which is innovation. And I know for this Western group, you are some of the most innovative DOTs in the country. And, again, excited to partner with you on some of your great ideas. At DOT, and we're lucky, we have a secretary, as you know, he is young and creative and really excited in what are the new innovations we can have in transportation in terms of materials and technologies and all the things we can be doing. We need to keep innovating. We need to innovate on roadways, on rails, on skies. We're seeing things from automated vehicles to drones to new climate resilient materials and technologies. We're constantly evaluating these new technologies. We want to work in partnership with you. We also want to be sure that we're working in partnership with transportation workers and the traveling public. And again, the bipartisan infrastructure bill will give us a jump start. It authorizes $500 million for a new smart grant program that will help state and local governments deploy innovative transportation technologies. It creates something that I think a lot of us have long been interested in ARPA-I, an Advanced Research Projects Agency for Infrastructure. And it's going to give a lot of support to university transportation centers to work on climate and equity and innovation. But some of the things we're excited about, and again, I know fascinating things Caltrans is doing, what you're doing here in Utah. Carlos is so creative, looking at new materials, looking at how we create smart corridors. So again, look forward to partnering with you all on that. As I've talked about these different priorities, I do want to note that, of course, to tackle all these priorities, we need to work together at all levels of government. I'll just sort of close with one example, something that I tried to do some work on as New York City DOT commissioner, and really, sort of felt on the ground the challenges of really transforming our vehicle fleet and electrifying it. The bipartisan infrastructure bill would build the first national network of electric vehicle chargers all across the country, with a real focus on rural areas and underserved areas in our cities. And here's the ways I think it would serve so many of our common goals. It would accelerate the adoption of EVs, which we all know would be a huge piece of tackling the climate crisis. It will make our residents safer. It will improve air quality, particularly in areas that have really been burdened by vehicle emissions. It's going to take innovation from all of us to deliver an EV charging network. And I think it's going to spur some innovation in ways we maybe haven't even imagined. It can provide real meaningful savings for Americans, particularly in terms of gas prices. And, the people that may benefit the most are in rural areas where people drive an average of 66% more miles every year than urban residents. It will also create good paying jobs for American auto workers who will make the vehicles, and for electric workers and others who will install the charging infrastructure. So it's another example of a way we can all work together. Look, in the West, you're already leading the way. Per capita, 8 of the top 10 states for EVs in the West. And I know the Western Governors Association is leading the way on things like the Electric Vehicles Roadmap Initiative. We're committed at the federal level to continuing that partnership with you. So I just want to say in closing, again, thanks for having me here. And so sorry I'm not there in person. I do vow to come visit Utah and other states as soon as I can. But I just want to sort of close with a note about the bipartisan infrastructure bill, because it really has been inspiring this summer to see bipartisanship at work in transportation. It's one of the things that I've actually always loved about transportation. The bill, I think, passed, with Democratic votes and a lot of votes from Republican senators as well, from many of the states that are gathered here today. And thank you for that. We know we have a big opportunity together to invest in transportation, to create the kind of system we all want that's safe, that's resilient, that's equitable, that's innovative. And really look forward to partnering with you all. So for that, thank you, and happy to take a few questions.
Thank you, Polly. Thank you again. It's great to see you, by the way, and we look forward to seeing you at one of our conferences in the future, and also coming out to DC and seeing you there as well. We've sort of polled the group, and we've got 3 questions for you, if that's okay. The first one is, you've worked at the US DOT, New York City DOT, and now you're back at US DOT. What is it about transportation that gets you out of bed each morning?
That's a great question. And I think it's one we probably all share. It's a joke we used to make in New York that, basically the moment you step out the door, you are into the transportation system. From the sidewalks to the roadways to bus and transit systems to our bigger freight network, shipping, rail, you name it. And, for me, it's funny. I always have a joke at USDOT. We have pictures up of trains or planes. And I always say, I like the pictures that have got some people in them, because that's really what our system is about. It sounds a little corny, but in the end, it is about, I think, the mobility and the prosperity and the opportunity for the American public. And getting a chance, as all of us are due, to be privileged to serve the public in some role in our transportation system. I couldn't have asked for anything better in terms of my career.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I think all of us share that. And
Bill,
it
I
helped.
can't hear you.
Can hear me? Okay, hold on a second. They're fixing it now. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. I said I think we can all agree with you, and I'm looking at a lot of faces here and a lot of nodding heads, and I think that it touches everyone every day. And I was saying earlier in some of my comments that I didn't spend 30 years in this space, in the transportation space, but I've come to love it for a lot of different reasons, and one of them is its strong impact to daily life. Its strong impact to our economies and our towns and our states and our nation. And it's a remarkable world, transportation world that we live in and we work in and we strive in. And so I couldn't agree with you more. I have a second question. What is an issue in transportation that you are thinking about that other people aren't yet thinking about?
Well, I'm not going to flatter myself in front of this brilliant audience that I'm thinking of much that you all aren't thinking of. But I'll tell you one area I'm probably devoting a lot of time to. And look, this is I want to caveat by saying, it's been, as I said, an exciting summer working on this big bipartisan bill. It is not fully through Congress yet. So I say all this in a hopeful tone, but I don't want to take anything for granted. But I know for this group, there is a lot of interest in, if we pass this big transportation bill, how will we implement it? how will the department make sure that we're doing it well, that we're partnering with all of you? And look, just I think a sense of the numbers, DOT is currently a $90 billion a year agency. And look, I don't need to tell this group, a good amount of that money comes into us and then goes out the door to the states and to other transportation agencies. But if this bill passes, we will go from being a $90 billion a year agency to a $150 billion a year agency. And we recognize the responsibility, opportunity, and challenge of the tremendous growth that that represents and the new programs that we'll be creating. And I think for me, just thinking through both on the agency side, how we organize and staff up and make sure we're doing that well, but just as importantly, how we're going to work with all of you, how we're going to work with the key stakeholders. We know the folks who sometimes they love their partnership with the federal government and sometimes find this difficult to work with. But, you know, we want to make sure your voices and your perspectives are at the table, you know, every step of the way.
That's great. It's great to hear. Thank you so much for saying that. Thank you for your leadership on the issue of sort of communicating. And, you know, I never really thought about it that way. The idea that the agency has grown so much just in revenue alone and impact to the United States, it's into the world, really. It's remarkable. How fortunate we are to have you in a leadership position there. So thank you.
Thank you.
When the third question I have is, when your service comes to an end at USDOT, I didn't mean to say it that way, but I think that's how it's worded here. When your service comes to an end at USDOT, what do you hope you will have changed in that time?
Yeah. Well, I hope my service doesn't come to an end anytime soon, but I guess one knows as a political appointee, you don't get lifetime tenure. Look, I would say this, you know, and this summer drives it home for me. I do believe that we are in a climate crisis. And I think it has perhaps broken many of our hearts this summer to see the kind of damage unleashed in the West, with the fires, with hurricanes, with floods, and not just here in the United States. I mean, we've seen this impact globally, in Europe, in China, in other places. And it is not an easy thing for a national economy or a global economy that for many decades has been dependent on fossil fuels to decarbonize. I recognize that. I don't think that it's an easy thing to do, but I also think given the unbelievable creativity and will of groups like yours and what we hope to do at the federal level, we can really start to move the needle, and we can look at future generations at the time we had, whatever time, you know, the Biden administration is lucky enough to have, and say, you know, we left the planet in better shape than when we came in the door. Look, we have other important priorities. Equity and safety are high on our list, but I guess no one could look at the flames consuming the beautiful wilderness around Lake Tahoe, for example, or look at the flooded basements in New York City and not think deeply about what we need to do about climate.
Thank you for that. I share your view. And when I first started thinking about climate change, I worked with a person named Gina McCarthy, who works in the current administration, was the former US EPA administrator. And it really brought it home to me how complex the solutions will be, but how important they are. And again, thank you for saying that, and I think many of us here agree with you as well. So that's all I had, Polly Trottenberg. Thank you, Deputy Secretary Polly Trottenberg. Thank you so much. Many of your staff are here, by the way, and they all say hello, and they hope you get better soon. But they all say hello.
Thank you. I know, I'm sorry I'm not there and I'm not 100%, but you have an amazing, as you know, you've got some amazing DOT leadership, and I promise I will come. I hope I can come next week.
All of us are grateful. All of us are grateful and thankful. So thank you so much for being with us today.
All right, thanks so much, Bill and Steve. I know you all will have a great time.
Okay, I have logistics. Okay, just as a reminder, we're going to obviously break for lunch now. And I'm going to repeat a little bit of what Carlos said, just so you know. The buses will leave the Grand America for the host event at 6. They will be leaving every few minutes from the hotel to get everyone up to the host night event. For those of you that have been to WASHTO, you know this many times. For those of you who haven't, host night events are the bomb. So you really need to go. They're amazing. It's just an incredible experience and an incredible way to learn more about Utah. So they'll leave every few minutes from the hotel to get everyone to the host event. After the initial wave, they'll be leaving the hotel every 20 to 30 minutes. How did I do, Carlos? Excellent. All right. Thank you all for being with us this morning. And we look forward to seeing you throughout the next few days at the conference. Thank you.